I want this to be real and honest, and I'm noticing that I could say the lower my vibration goes, the more I sink into my ego, the more chance there is for my ego to take a hold, jump in, and speak. And the ego never speaks from a place of true honesty. It's always making shit up. It's always spinning a story. So anything that comes from the ego is just automatically going to be not useful, not truthful. It's just stuck in a web. To me, the ego feels like a web. And or whatever you want to call it, it feels like there's a sticky web, and it is really good at disguising itself, masking, presenting something to itself and to the world, and that's part of its function. So as long as I come from that place, there's no real fundamental change. It's just the same thing. That's what creates and reinforces the loop. So my intention, my goal is to move out of that. Which I feel I've been able to do before. And it's more just like getting back out of it, and maybe this time doing it more fully, I don't know. Doing it so that I don't slip back in so much as easily. Part of the ego's trap, though, is it sometimes it makes you think you're further ahead than you really are, and that is a trap. And sometimes it makes you think you're further behind than you really are, which is also a trap. So it's like both ways. And if you tend to be extremely hard on yourself, it's probably going to take advantage of the latter, though it can use both. So besides the point, what I wanted to talk about is feels like I'm in this heaviness, like this muck, and in general, I know how to get out of it, and I think I could if I put some real effort into it and intention. It's like climbing a ladder and just do it step by step. But there's a thought there that I shouldn't do that, because there's a feeling that I have to learn something from this muck, from this heaviness, before I can move forward. And if I keep avoiding it, then I'm just going to keep spinning into the same pattern, the same cycle, rising up and falling again, over and over, and it's just not going to change until I face this shit. So that comes up. I know in this disempowered state, reality is not as flexible, or it's not. Reality definitely shifts when you shift, and if you're in a disempowered state, this is a victim mentality. I just want to be clear about that. This is a victim mentality. This is feeling sorry for myself. This is feeling heavy, feeling dense, sometimes having feelings of wanting to die. This is wanting validation from other people, wanting to control things, self-sabotaging. And I'm realizing it's refreshing in a way once you get out of this state to look back on it, and even to get out of it and come back into it and start to see it with new eyes that you didn't see before. Because now, since I've been out of it and now that I'm back into it, I can see more clearly the patterns and just how pervasive they were, and just how much I didn't really notice them. Like, just how much I self-sabotaged, like with all kinds of little things that added up. Saying yes to the wrong things, saying no to the wrong things. Lack of time management, which really just comes from disorientation and lack of alignment with myself. Time management is a consequence, it's not a cause. Or it's not the root. It all comes back to being in alignment or being out of alignment. So I was in that, feeling hard on myself, not forgiving myself. I carried lots of baggage, years of weight of shame and guilt, which I was aware of, but I just wasn't either feeling able or willing to let that go. And I did start chipping away at it, but it was years of guilt, holding on to memories from things, even from early childhood, that I just refused to forgive myself for. Like, I was still judging myself for those things from years ago. And so this was, you know, an immense amount of baggage that I was carrying that affected my self-worth and made me hold on to these stories and made me, in a way, try to fight these stories back, like, constantly. At the very least, unconsciously, sometimes consciously. And I was, in a way, trying to prove, I guess, myself wrong, but maybe other people wrong also, trying to prove them wrong, that that's not who I am anymore, you know? But when you're trying to prove someone wrong, it doesn't work as well. It's a weak, fragile, it's a vulnerable position to stand on, because anything that challenges the ego can topple it over, which is exactly what happened. You could say I could expand and rise into another version of myself, but I would fall back and topple over with any kind of damage to my ego, or just triggering, you know, trauma or something. But yeah, I still got triggered and I still felt a lot. I think I got better at that. I do feel like I started to let some of that stuff go. It started to shift. I think a good chunk of that baggage was able to be released, but it still left a lot over. And, you know, at some points I celebrated what I did let go of, which was good. You got to celebrate it. You know, maybe I wasn't seeing clearly enough that there was still a lot of baggage still there. And that's what the universe was trying to point out, and I wasn't willing to look at it. Because of this sense of shame, like, oh, I finally escaped this. Why do I have to revisit this stuff? Why do I have to go back there? I already did this. But I think it was just trying to show me, like, there's still mountains of stuff you haven't let go of. You know, that's why you have to revisit this. That makes me feel kind of sick, because I wasn't willing to do that. And I was seeing it as a bad thing and not as this is part of the process. You're in the process. Good job. Just keep going, you know. Take care of yourself. Get some rest. Get some exercise. But, you know, keep going. You're still in the process. Don't get ahead of yourself, but also don't put yourself down. You're doing it. You're doing the work. And I wasn't seeing it like that. I was seeing it as like all or nothing. Like, either I get this all in a couple days, either I break through this shit in a few days, or it wasn't worth it, or I failed, or I didn't get it. That's how I was seeing it. And that's what was causing me to fail. Because it was creating shame, and it was getting me stuck in a shame cycle of feeling like I fell or made a mistake, then rising up out of it, having some success, getting triggered again, and then falling again, and then beating myself up, creating more shame, and then just, you know, because there was still stuff I wasn't looking at. And the only way to move forward, you can't move forward at this point with just still beating yourself up, because that's obviously not going to go anywhere. But I have to see clearly that that's what was happening and is still happening, but it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to happen. Yeah, it's funny, there's this show Undone I've been watching, and the first season really, really resonated with me when I watched it last year, and it synced up so much with certain themes in my life I was dealing with, and it almost felt like it was like a parallel journey. Like, I was going on that journey as I was watching the show, so it was kind of cool. Very synchronistic. And then fast forward to several months later, at the end of the year, and then I realized that there is a season 2. I didn't think there was a season 2. and watch that, and lo and behold, it still resonates and syncs up with pretty much exactly what I'm experiencing, exactly what I've been going through. More than I can even say. Stuff people really wouldn't believe, but it's true. It felt like that show was my life in a lot of ways, and the way it ended was almost eerie, but it hit, and it was true, and I knew it was true, but I didn't really want to admit it, because the way it ends is she goes back, she finally gets the life that she wanted, but then she gets pulled back into her old former version of herself who's suffering and is, just really not doing well. And she realizes, I gotta go back to this version of me because she needs me. I need to bring back everything I've learned from this, all the strength I gained from this, and I need to bring it to her. And that didn't hit. I mean, I think it hit, and I didn't want to see it, because to me I still interpreted that as failure. I still did. Even though when she went, if you look at it in a way, like, she still had a lot of the things that she needed and wanted in that former life, and the magical rule is when you change, reality changes. So with her going back, bringing all of her lessons and strength with her, her reality is still going to shift. So it's not that necessarily you have to jump into another reality that conforms to what you want. It's more you change, and then reality changes with you, but also your perspective changes, which is just as important, I guess. Yeah. And I'm sitting with all that. It feels like there have been all these versions of me and versions of my reality and life path that presented themselves last year. It's like I saw all of these different timelines that I could go down, many timelines. And inherently, I don't think any of them were bad, but there was one clear timeline that I wanted above all else. Maybe two, but there was one in particular that really felt resonant, that felt strong, that this is it, this is the one that I want. It was just a knowing, and you do have to trust and follow that, because there are, I don't know for sure, and I don't think anyone knows for sure, if everything's predetermined, if everything is just laid out and you just follow that path, and there is no true free will. And free will and determinism might be a false dichotomy anyways. There could be, it might not be conceivable in those terms, but whatever's going on here. So I don't know if there's just like a path that's just written out for you and you just follow it, or if what's actually happening is it's just constant creativity, and you're constantly shaping and reshaping your path with the universe, and it's a co-creation, and it's not just one path, but many possibilities you can go down. So I don't know. My whole experience from last year makes me lean towards the latter, but maybe in a way both can be true. Maybe there are certain themes that are laid out that are meant for you to follow, but those can manifest in so many different ways. Maybe it's more about the energy and the quality that's important rather than the exact specifications. So maybe it's something like that, but I don't think anyone really knows this for sure. And maybe it's pointless to try to know it for sure, because all we know is our experience. And I don't know. Just, if it feels like this is a co-creative process, to me it feels like a dance with the universe. You step in, it steps with you, and you dance in a rhythm, and your role is to stay with the rhythm. Kind of, you and the universe guide each other to a certain direction, or you're guiding the universe. You're like moving in a certain direction, but you still got to stay in rhythm and not overstep and not trip over yourself. But if you do, you get back up and you get back into the rhythm. To me, that's what it feels like, and I know it's just a metaphor. That's not the ultimate truth, but that's a metaphor that feels like it applies pretty well for me. It's a good reminder for myself. It's neither imposing your will on reality, and it's also not being a helpless victim to it. Yeah. Because I think as true surrender isn't powerlessness. It's I feel like the deeper layer of surrender is seeing that this is not separate, nothing separate, and life is flowing through you. It's flowing through everything, and it's one life. It's not multiple lives. It's one life flowing through you and everything. So it's guiding you, and you are it. So, and that's where I think the free will versus determinism falls apart, because it still assumes, that dichotomy still assumes separation. But if there is no separation, then that it's a pointless question in a way. But that's me being in my head about it, and that's not me processing the deeper stuff that's coming through. So, what was the point I was trying to make? What was the whole reason for me to say that? That show, yeah. So that show, at the end of it, she goes back to her old version of herself, and she brings these gifts with her. And that's what I felt like I was being called to do, to go to these younger versions of myself, these versions of myself that hold so much guilt and shame for feeling out of place from mistakes that they feel they made, or just not fitting in for a lot of stuff. Feeling powerless, feeling like victims, and just going sort of back to them and giving them this strength and these lessons and empowering them. But I thought that was kind of cheesy and too new agey, even though I've done that kind of work before, and I know it can be valuable. I guess I was dismissing it as like, oh, that's just more endless healing work, or that's just not getting to the real root of it. But you get these ideas sometimes from people, even people, teachers you really trust, who really seem to get it, and you follow them, and when you're with the right teacher, or you're getting the right kind of advice or pointer at the right time, things do shift, and if it resonates, it resonates. That means you're supposed to follow it. So, I mean, that happens, that's true, but you don't have to take on everything that they say and every single pointer, because it's not all going to be fully relevant. It's like maybe one pointer is relevant at a certain time, and then another is at a later time, and it's a process. So in some ways, I was taking certain things on too seriously, maybe, or just like, that's when you live in your head and not in relationship with the universe directly. Because the universe is really the real teacher, and you take your lead from the universe and from your inner compass. That's what leads you to the resonant pointers that are relevant, So if it leads you there, it's going to lead you to the next step and the next step, and you follow that, and you stay committed to that, your inner compass, and where the universe is leading you, what the clear indications it's pointing you to. And those were clear indications that were being pointed. Sometimes it gets confusing because I'm just going to leave it at that, actually. Yeah. I was resisting that because I was holding on to some stuff in my head. And maybe there's some self-sabotage mechanism at work too. that knew what I needed to do, maybe on some level. And yeah, there was still something I think that felt like I didn't deserve it. And that's, that's its own feedback loop. That's shame too. That's that whole cycle. You don't feel like you deserve something because of the shame. Then you do things out of the shame, like self-sabotage, that make you feel even more like you don't deserve it. So you push it more and more away. And so when you do finally look at that shame, if you're really looking at it, it might feel overwhelming. It might feel like a lot. Especially if you go into a state where you kind of just are forced to see it sort of all at once, or you just get hit with a lot of it. Yeah. And it's hard to cope with seeing yourself push that thing you want away. It makes you feel like you're dying. I think there is a highest path for people. Like in the ultimate sense, nothing is truly right or wrong, because ultimately we give all the meaning to everything that's happening. So that is true, but in this life, as a character, there are still things that resonate or don't. There is still an inner compass that guides us and leads us to what we want and leads us to a certain flow, a certain trajectory. So that's also true. It's part of the dream, it's part of the play. It's not the ultimate truth, but it's like, as long as there's a character to play a role, then that's gonna happen. And there's no point in following what doesn't resonate and ignoring what does. And I believe if you follow what resonates, it's like when you follow what resonates, you're following your intuition, your guidance, you're following what the universe put there for you. And so that is also surrender. You follow what resonates. That's trust. And you just follow that path, that trajectory. And if it's a trajectory that's gonna get you to evolve and expand, then it's gonna force you to confront your fears, and it's gonna bring challenges with it that's gonna help you to move further. And you follow that trajectory for as long as it resonates, and maybe it turns at a certain point and you'll know when it does, because something else will resonate. But that's, I think, how it goes. It is a form of passivity and avoidance to just say, nothing inherently means anything, so there's no right or wrong, good or bad, so anything goes. And it's false to then just be like, well, I have no preferences, so I'm just gonna go with whatever. But maybe that's just a belief I'm holding on to. That's not true either, because maybe then it still plays out and works out. Trajectory still forms. As long as you're in the play, some kind of trajectory is still gonna form. It's gonna form. And the less resistance you have to it, the better. And it guess it's only resistance to things that leads us down the wrong path and away from the path we're supposed to be on. So I don't know, really. But what I do feel is like, I did feel strong resonance with the path, and I kept fighting it. I knew I was fighting it, and I did everything in me to fighting it, to come back to it, to stop running from it, to stop getting in my own way. I tried to fight myself from fighting it. And that also fed into the cycle. Because the only reason I was fighting it was because of shame and fear. And I just had to get out of my own way and listen and trust. And it makes me feel sick because it feels like it was my highest path. And I fought it. And I feel like I've left in the cold. I feel like I it feels like I'm dying, or feels like I want to die. And I can't feel sorry for myself. You know, I did this. And this is a cycle too. If you look at some of my videos, you'll see it, but this is a cycle too where I almost make it, or I do start to make it and I fall, and I'm stuck saying, well, here I am again, well, here I am again, well, here I am again, here I am again, da 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 da. That's a fucking Groundhog Day. And you just get sick of it. I mean, yeah, you gotta be honest with yourself. You gotta see what's happening. And if the same thing is repeating, then there must be something that you're not seeing. And I think the shame part of it was maybe one piece that I wasn't fully seeing. So you gotta keep at it. You gotta keep saying, well, what am I not seeing here? What am I not seeing clearly? But yeah, it gets kind of sickening to be back in the same place again. Be like, oh, well, here I am. It gets old. It gets fucking old. And you might feel like, well, maybe it is time to just, just give up on this then and just start something new. And maybe it is, but it also doesn't feel aligned. It feels empty. It feels, maybe that's entitlement. I don't know. Maybe that's entitlement. Because a lot of people live life like this. I'd say most people live life in sort of this almost quasi-numb comfort zone. They're not breaking through big barriers. They're just in a comfort zone. They're just in a routine. They're in kind of the same pattern. And that pattern might change in some relatively minor ways, or it might shift in some ways, but it still kind of goes around the same sort of thing. And they just live life like that, and they might dream about living outside that, but they never either take action or they keep getting in their own way. And so they just kind of live sort of the rest of their life or a long number of years just in that comfort zone. And sometimes maybe a crisis will hit or something will shake things up, and that'll give them a chance to like reevaluate. And then they might leave the comfort zone and go into a new territory, or they might at some point just go back to the way things were. And I think generally people just stay in their comfort zone, and maybe they like it. And they don't know what they don't know. If they were to leave the comfort zone, they'd know that it's better outside of it subjectively. But until they know that, they don't know it. So, and the irony is that that's me. Been dreaming about living outside of this comfort zone, living into this more expansive space. And I do start to break that comfort zone, leave it, but then I get sucked back into it and I just spin around. And I think mostly last year, there was a good chunk of last year where I think I really was leaving the comfort zone, and I was further outside of it than I gave myself credit for. And one of the traps was believing that I was still stuck in it, when I wasn't seeing, like, I'm not stuck in the loop. I'm not stuck in the comfort zone per se. I'm just facing some really deep, heavy fears that I just need some time probably to process through, or a different approach to look at them. But that doesn't mean I'm not outside the comfort zone. And when you leave the comfort zone, you do face those fears. Those fears are presented to you, because those are the guardians that keep you stuck. So maybe I wasn't fully outside the loop, but I was at the very least right at the door, right at the edge of it, and not prisoner. But I had to face this fear. And it's like I manifested myself back into the comfort zone because I kept seeing that as failure. Because this fear is coming up, I must be a failure. That's how I interpreted it. And I did that so many times, I made it a reality. I pushed myself back. What am I really trying to say? I have to ask myself this question, because sometimes when I'm speaking, I can tell when it's just from a mental space, and that doesn't do anything. That's like meaningless. It's just farting. But I can tell when there's something that's like needing to come out, because then I feel it too. So what am I really trying to say? What do I need to say? It's like I pulled myself off track. This is a good example too. Like, it's like when I get pulled back into this numbness or this spaciness, it just feels like an emptiness. It feels like a spaciness And sometimes it's just like really neutral, but I know it's actually just some form of avoidance or tiredness. I mean, I am exhausted, like physically, mentally, emotionally, I'm exhausted. So, yeah, there's that. But the body needs rest, for sure. And there's a fear of slipping out of sync further. And I don't want to feed that, but I just want to observe it as like that is a fear, that it's the legitimate fear, because this is what people do. You slip back into old routines, and the more you slip back into them, it's like the more clouded you get. And I want to stay alive. I want to stay more awake. I want to move into an upward trajectory again. That's important. That's important to me, to stay in an upward trajectory. That's really important to me. So I think I just gotta do that, you know? Part of that is being honest with myself. Part of that is taking action that is resonant. And I just have to keep tuning into like what feels resonant and just keep following that. Even if it feels relatively small, it can be like a small action during the day. But those actions stack up. And I just gotta keep following them. And I do have to face my fears, but if I try to go into it right now, it feels like there's this shut-off mechanism. It's like it's just numb. So I think I just have to follow what resonates and just like see where that goes. And at a certain point when I'm ready, then I'm sure I'll be able to face these fears. So I just have to trust that. I just have to trust that. Somehow. Because I do have to face these fears if I want to keep advancing. And now, maybe right now, it's just the focus is just on, okay, what's the next step? What's the next most resonant step? And just trusting that. So, yeah, I guess this felt like my next step. Doing this, taking a bath, doing this video. Yeah. I guess it takes some courage to fall, to feel like you fell so many times and to keep going. But there are people who go through much worse, who have it much worse. And I have a lot to be grateful for. I have a lot to be grateful for. So much. And part of my life purpose, I feel, is to help other people be co-creators, conscious co-creators, so they can have more of the life that they want, so they can live in alignment, play with reality more. I don't feel like I'm here to just follow my own path and be isolated and ignore everything. Who knows? Maybe that is what I end up being. I don't know, but I feel, at least right now, like I am here to get my shit together. I am here to expand, overcome my barriers, and help other people to do the same. So yeah, I just gotta remember that. Maybe there's some self-righteousness in that, or maybe there isn't something in that too that's trying to appease the guilt of feeling like I'm better off in some ways than other people, and because there is a sense of guilt that comes with that. But I would rather that be appreciation and seeing where I can be of service, seeing where I can be of support, not feeling guilty for it. You got to take a hard look at reality. You got to see, like, in this reality, anything can happen, and that goes both ways. There is no right or wrong, I guess, but anything can happen. Any bad thing, any good thing. It's infinite possibilities, and that can go in any direction. And some people in the spiritual community or New Age like to focus just on the good, like any good thing can happen. And that's not a bad thing to do necessarily, but especially if you've already experienced a lot of bad shit, then you need to balance that out with, like, okay, well, now anything amazing can happen. I've already been through a lot of the hell. So it's good to, like, balance that. But, sometimes people also can use that as avoidance. Why don't I just bring that back to myself, I've been starting to feel that. I've been feeling more and more the past couple of years that reality really can work for you and with you, and as long as you're conscious and intentional with it, and as long as you do the inner work to clear out blockages, then, and as long as you go with the flow of things, then life can generally be really good and really amazing and magical. And that just amped up last year. That reached a high pitch last year where just a lot of amazing things were happening, like really effortlessly. And I still believe that, and I still feel like that's true. But end of last year, really this year, no, it was really, it was starting to sink in this year, last month and this month. Just this heaviness. And I think I was going in and out of a depression. So this was happening while I was in the depression, but just this heavy feeling and just this, sometimes a focus on like anything amazing can happen, but also anything horrible can happen. Which was coming up last year too, because I was in sometimes a paranoid state of just being really afraid of some horrible things happening. But I could bounce out of that pretty quick and go into an elevated state of infinite potential of just like feeling like, well, I'm still a co-creator, so amazing things can still happen. So I was bouncing between that, and I think that's how I was navigating it. It was really going between two extremes, in a sense, but I don't know. Even when I was in the extreme of feeling paranoid, I don't know how to say it. Like, there was still something different about that that's different from now. It still felt like there was, like I still had more energy overall. There was more energy flowing through me, whether it was focused on fear or focused on all the magic. And part of the reason I was afraid was because I was seeing how connected everything is, and I was afraid of the impact partly that I could have. So it was a weird kind of fear in the sense that it still came from an empowered place, but also it was, I think, still rooted in some old trauma, and yeah, it was it was mostly rooted, I think, in the fear of what I could do. Whereas now it's been feeling more like just fear of life in general. It's had more of a powerless feeling to it, more of a helpless feeling, a disconnected feeling, a feeling of like, well, anything in life can happen and I just have to accept it. Which is really where most people come from. That I'm realizing that that's how a lot of people think and believe. Relatively speaking, and I think I think people have this awareness, but that's why they just tune it out with like distraction, entertainment, and stuff, and wishful thinking and fantasy. And I think I'm just getting to see that more clearly. Because in some ways, I mean, it feels familiar. I did live in this mental space. I used to live in this mental space, for sure, but not, I don't know. I think I still had a sense of the magic in life, though. Like, I had this sense to some degree, but I still also maintained a sense that magic still happens, and you just have to learn how to work with the universe. And I think how I've worked with the universe in some ways has evolved or changed, but I think in some ways that basic sense has kind of stayed the same for a while. I think it just got heightened last year with just a lot of extra energy and motivation, resonance. But yeah, this feels more just like this heaviness. It's just a sense like, it's a sense of almost like powerlessness. But not even completely, because there is still a sense, I feel like I'm bouncing around and I just need to get this straight. There is sometimes still a sense that I created this, where I'm at right now, how things fell. I did that. And there is ownership of that. I did that. I know I did that. And there's regret. I think immense regret that I haven't been able to fully feel, but that I haven't let myself fully feel yet. But I think it's immense. There's regret. There's sadness, pain. And I think what comes with that is a sense of the fragility. I wanted to think and believe that it's weird because I was afraid of this being the case, and it's not like I didn't feel a pressure or an urgency to like get it right and not fuck it up. I felt it immensely, so much so that I think it created a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it's like I'm trying to rationalize it right now, but I felt an immense pressure to not get it wrong. And that, I feel, made me get it wrong. I feel like that created that. But it's true that I don't know. It's maybe this is hard for me to talk about, but life is precious. The things that come into our life are precious, and we shouldn't take them for granted. I think that's just the theme right now. I think that's the theme right now. Not taking things for granted. Because even though I put pressure on myself, in a way I did take for granted what I had. See, I didn't realize what I had. And I didn't realize the good position I was actually in. Even though I did make some mistakes and I fucked up, which is normal. In the situation I was in, that's normal. And I wasn't accepting that either. Like, I have issues I'm still working on. I'm not perfect. And those issues are going to come up. And that's okay. You just have to keep your cool. You got to be able to stand back and reassess and then move forward and communicate and just like forgive yourself. Forgive yourself, move forward, be honest, and do better next time. And you can't do better next time if you're beating yourself up and still holding on to that guilt of like, I fucked up, I did this wrong, I'm a failure. So that doesn't it doesn't change anything. So yeah, I was doing normal stuff for my situation, my circumstances. But then I was beating myself up and making it worse on myself. And that was the problem. And so I wasn't learning because I kept beating myself up. And that was giving my ego more fuel to sabotage things. Because then the ego, which is great at doing this, it will take things and repurpose them for its own use. It will take spiritual things you're doing or self-help things you're doing. It'll take anything you do that it can use to repurpose to sabotage you. The ego is good at doing that. It's a game. And so the more I was beating myself up, the more my ego had power to do that, to rationalize pushing away what I wanted, to pick fights with different parts of myself, to create inner conflict, inner drama that manifested externally. So yeah, I did that. I allowed that to happen. I did it. And you know your ego is in control when you're just in your head, when you're disconnected from your heart or your resonance, when you can't sense what resonates and what doesn't, or you're not paying attention to that, you know your ego is in charge. When you're not listening to the universe, you know your ego is in charge. When you're not going with the flow. And your ego is meant to keep you stuck in a loop, stuck in a script. It's not meant to help you expand. Your ego is a loop.